Hello and welcome to the world-famous and award-winning Driving You Crazy podcast. This is the show where we talk about all things transportation, anything that gets you from here to there. I'm the traffic anchor and the transportation reporter for Denver 7 News, Jason Luber, and if you would like to be a part of the show, you sure can be. You can call the listener hotline. In fact, I have a listener who called about one of the last episodes and has this comment to share.
Hey, Jason, I just listened to your podcast about using cameras for automatic enforcement, and you gave the instructor the example of people speeding through a school zone where your cameraman went out to take photos. My comment is, if that much is happening, we don't need automatic enforcement. We need to actually have a cop go out there and make arrests or issue citations. We would easily pay for that cop's salary if there is that much of a problem. Thanks, long-term listener. Enjoy the podcast. Bye-bye.
I totally agree with you. I totally agree with you 100%. And the original story came in from a viewer who said, I would like to see some of those flashing lights to bring the attention to the driver that, hey, you are in a school zone and you should be slowing down. Now, in this school zone where this school is, it's a small school. It's not like a really big one. And so it only goes between basically one block. And it's pushed back from that main road right there. So I don't think people are seeing the school there or thinking that it's a school there and are just blowing past it, and they don't care that there's a school zone. So I think there's more unawareness, and that's why this person who wrote to me said we'd like to see if you could help get the city to put some flashing lights up there. But I totally agree that is one of my biggest pet peeves, is when people speed in a school zone, whether they know it or not. Because I hate it. I've seen it so many times, and there is no reason. So it's going to cost you 30 seconds. Whoopee. 30 seconds, 45 seconds to slow down in a school zone. Well, then you should have left a minute earlier, and you'll be actually early then, and still be able to slow down in the school zone. There are children there. And this is what I don't understand about when people are speeding or doing reckless things like this in the car. I don't think they realize what a responsibility it is. And when somebody kills somebody in a car, there are the penalties really are not stiff enough. That's one thing. But you have ruined the lives, obviously, of the person that was hit and killed or seriously injured. And then the person that did the hitting, the driver, is also going to think about that for the rest of their lives and have to deal with the consequences, legal and other monetary issues, be sued or whatever, for the rest of their lives as well. All for what? A few minutes. That's all it is. It's just a few minutes. I am no great example of following the speed limit on the interstates. I'm not. I do tend to go a little faster than the speed limit on the interstates. When I'm on the regular roadways, I'm pretty close to the speed limit. And I'm in a school zone, and especially when the school zone is active, boom, I am going at or under that speed limit. That's just me. So I totally agree with you, Blake. Totally agree that there should be cops out there, and I will talk to the cops as part of this story. I just had to go out and send the photographer because the school zone is active when I'm still on TV. I couldn't go out there myself, and it's very rare I'll send a photographer out to one of my on-air TV Driving You Crazy stories. Otherwise, I am doing all of the recording of the video because I like to go out to these places so I can see for myself what it's like, what it feels like, what those drivers that are writing to me are seeing and feeling and hearing. And so I can get a sense from that of what issues might be out there. And then I could see something that they might not see as well. Like there's many times, one recent one, there was somebody was complaining about people not stopping on a red traffic signal to make a right turn. Well, there were two areas that he was complaining about. One, there was no cross traffic. So I think the drivers had the feeling that they were just safe because nobody's coming from the left. So they're just going to keep on going right and not worry about it. The other place that he said he saw this all the time was actually in a place that you should be going. You should slow down and stop if necessary. But then you can keep going because it's a continuous lane. And so you can go make that right turn more safely. And well, anyway, but I couldn't have known that unless I went out there to these stories. So this was one of the few. that I wasn't able to go out there. But I have gone out there, just not during the school zone times, to watch how many people during the morning commute especially are blowing through there. So I will talk to the Denver Police Department and ask them about this. I got to talk to the city and see if they'll put up one of the flashing school signs, and I'll talk to the school and see if they've done that, because I've done a similar story with a school over in central Denver where they have a known problem of people speeding through there, and the Denver Police Department does go out there regularly and ticket people, and they ticket a lot of people. And like you said, Blake, they will get all the money they need to pay that officers and a dozen others their salary with all the fines that they're writing for people speeding in that school zone. So if you have a question or comment or concern and would like to call the listener hotline, I sure would appreciate it. The number's 303-832-0217. And of course, that contact number is in the description of this show, as are all my other contact links. Actually, is it? Yes, it is. It's there. I'm looking at it now. It's right there. You get my Driving You Crazy Denver 7 email address, and you got my Gmail address, and you got my Facebook pages and WhatsApp and Instagrams and all that stuff. It's all right there. Last week, I'm on my couch after working in my garage all day, cleaning it out. And I was looking on Amazon for one of those pulley lift thingies so I can store my bike up in the ceiling of my garage. So I get on the app, I find the thing, I order it, and it's like 7 o'clock on a Sunday night. The package was delivered to my front door at 9:30 the next morning. It was amazing. I ordered this thing, I went to sleep, went to work, had the package waiting for me when I got home. That to me is remarkable. And I say all of this because there is so much work behind the scenes by Amazon figuring out the most efficient way to get that package from them to me while saving them the most amount of time and money. There's a tremendous amount of pressure on delivery companies right now to get stuff you ordered to your home in the same day or in the next couple of days and get it there as efficiently and as inexpensively as possible. So how can they route all that stuff to the right place in the quickest amount of time with the least amount of cost? So I was contacted by a company called Adiona Tech. They're based in Sydney, Australia, to talk to Richard Savoie. He's co-founder and the current CEO, to talk about how they are finding these solutions to these delivery logistic issues. Adiona says that they offer better last-mile delivery routing for sustainability, efficiency, and customer experience. Richard, thanks so much for being here on the world-famous Driving You Crazy podcast.
Thanks for having me, Jason. Really appreciate it.
All right, so as we can tell, even from that little bit of saying thank you, you don't sound like you're part of the Healer family, we're Bluey, right? That made famous by the kids' show Bluey.
I don't. Oh, man, then my practice of this accent has been all for nothing, I guess.
I guess so.
No, you caught me. You caught me, Jason. I snuck in. I'm technically an Australian-American. I'm from New Hampshire originally.
Nice. Yeah, so how'd you end up in Australia?
As is often the case, my partner, my wife, she's also from New Hampshire, but she was obsessed with Australia from a very young age, had a pet, a stuffed koala. Yeah. Not a pet koala. That would be illegal in most places. That'd be very illegal. A stuffed koala that she was obsessed with, and she got an opportunity to take a contract job in Australia, convinced me to come for 1 year, quote unquote, and that was 15 years ago. We really love it here. It's a great place to live. Wow. Have you been? Have you been down here?
I have not. My daughters, though, they do watch a lot of Bluey, and so they can speak in a perfect Australian accent.
And me, despite having been here for 15 years, I sound like some kind of a really creepy person when I try it, so I don't even bother.
But as I said, you're down there in Sydney, and every time I talk to somebody from a different part of the world outside the United States, I ask what it's like driving there compared to driving in the United States. I know you spent a lot of time there in the Northeast and up in Boston. So what's it like driving there compared to here?
I do like to make a bit of fun of Australians because they think that their traffic is bad, but they don't really know what bad traffic is. They then go and travel to London or LA or New York and lots of places, and then they realize what real bad traffic is like, right. Because there's really good public transport here. So Sydney and Melbourne especially have very good public transport. Both cities that hosted the Olympics before, so massive investment in trains and buses and things like that, and metro lines that run really fast and frequently. So I think the traffic is not quite so bad, but it's also a great place to do what we do and to do what we came to talk about, because it's got a mix of dense urban cities with lots of population and short distances. But then, just like the U.S., I don't know, most people may not realize that the continent of Australia is about the same size as the continental U.S. So there's an enormous amount of geography to span. The difference being that 90% of the population here lives near the coast, whereas obviously the U.S. is a little bit more filled out in the middle.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. And so I think, as we'll talk about that in just a little bit, all of those deliveries will be a challenge in some of the more rural areas like it is here in the United States. Adiona is a very unique name. Where does that come from?
Adiona is actually the Roman goddess of the return journey.
Okay.
So her and her sister Abiona were responsible for school children getting back and forth safely. And because we started this as a sustainability project and our initial work was really about reducing emissions in transport, we felt that was really appropriate. And then obviously this, combining the financial efficiency and improvement along with the sustainability is just a perfect blend.
Right. And you describe yourself on your LinkedIn page as a patent-holding executive and engineer that's currently reinventing urban mobility, logistics, and transport planning. Is this where you thought you would be when you were going to school there at Northeastern?
Not at all. Not at all. I like to say that I'm underqualified for everything I've ever done. But that's the way you get room for growth.
Yeah.
And as you said, I went to Northeastern in Boston and studied in electrical engineering, and then spent 15 years designing medical devices. So cardiology equipment, cardiovascular equipment, exported all over the world. And when I moved to Sydney, that's where I was working. I was managing a small cardiology company. But I wanted to start a business of my own. I wanted it to be sustainability minded. Didn't actually know what that was, but I knew it was my time to jump out of the pool into my own venture. And so, yeah, it ended up being this because of the burden of commuting. And this is something, being heavily invested and involved in traffic yourself, that was part of the appeal of your media empire, Jason, is that traffic is just the bane of so many people's existence. And yet there are new ways that we can approach minimizing traffic.
My guest is Rich Savoie. He's current CEO and co-founder of Adiona Tech, a Sydney-based software company. We're talking about efficient deliveries and getting things from here to there. So let's talk about those delivery logistics, because at your core, you are a software business that is using AI, right, to attempt to calculate the most efficient way to get from here to there.
Yeah, correct. That is the core innovation that we created, and then we've added in an ecosystem of other tools that are built around that.
So to you and your company, what is more important than finding the most efficient delivery possible or reducing emissions?
Both. And that's a really great question, because we find that finding the most efficient delivery route leads to both outcomes. You get a reduced cost of service, you get a delighted customer because things show up on time and quickly, like your example, and then you also get a reduced emissions profile, which, because transport is actually the second largest emitting sector, and road transport is the biggest component of that emissions profile for transport, there's a lot to be gained. It's a huge piece of low-hanging fruit to optimize commercial transport and then be able to reduce emissions in the process.
Yeah, and you say your business that you solve that last mile problem, and everybody's trying to solve that last mile problem. And when you say last mile solutions, are you talking about handling deliveries from a freight yard to a local address? What do you exactly mean for your interpretation of last mile problem?
Yeah, we definitely focus on the medium and large enterprise space, meaning that, like Amazon or many other companies, you got a lot of products to deliver, generally in pretty dense areas. And I like to highlight this with just some really simple math, right? Yeah. If you've got one van and you've got 10 deliveries to make, and they're spread out around your road network, there's over 3.6 million different ways to sequence just those 10 jobs. Wow. Right? So any kind of software solution needs to work its way through all 3.6 million potential solutions and figure out what's the most efficient one. Now, okay, that's cool, but think, if it's just 10 deliveries in one van, 3.6 million possible solutions, 100 deliveries and 10 vans, now you've got more potential solutions than the number of stars in the known universe. It's an enormously complicated challenge to solve mathematically. And we used to highlight this because we built a game. Oftentimes, like your example, people just don't really think about what's under the hood of how their Amazon deliveries get to them. So this game was just dropping 10 pins around a dense neighborhood, and you have a little car, and you get to choose your route versus our AI. And of course, our AI always wins.
Yeah.
But it was a great way for your average person, including myself, who doesn't come from a logistics background, to really visualize how complicated this problem is.
But that's all in a perfect world. We don't live in a perfect world with perfect drivers, and they cause crashes. Their car breaks down. There is weather issues. There's potholes. There's whatever that flies into the road. And so your 10 deliveries with your 3.6 million routes that you could take now is even more exponentially higher.
That's right. The one you picked, which was the most efficient out of those 3.6 million at that time, suddenly now conditions have changed. It's no longer the best.
Yeah.
And this is a massive opportunity for how we use AI, because we use it both in the pre-planning. So AI can break those massive problems down. I'll give you an example, okay? Some of the companies we work with are what they call third-party logistics companies. And to some extent, Amazon is one as well. But think about it this way. Like if you order a meal kit, like a HelloFresh or Marley Spoon or U-Foods or Blue Apron, right? Very popular brands. None of those companies is usually big enough to have their own delivery fleet and their own refrigerated warehouses to store all this stuff. So there's a whole network of companies that are called third-party logistics companies that will have a massive refrigerated warehouse, refrigerated vans, and then those meal kit companies will outsource all the delivery to them. So now imagine that one third-party logistics company with the massive warehouse, they're getting orders chucked at them from all different directions, right? You just ordered a new change to your kit. Somebody else down the street ordered a change. They've got to then plan for tomorrow, what are we going to do to get efficient deliveries? Cool. But it's tens of thousands of deliveries in one metro area. So this is where AI can help us break down that problem into smaller chunks, cluster it, and make it solvable kind of in parallel. Instead of doing it sequentially, stepwise, you can do it in parallel, which makes it much faster. And then adding in the layer that you just spoke about, which is on the day, as conditions are changing, reprocessing all of that. And that's where agentic AI, using an AI agent that can actually make decisions on your behalf and anticipate what you want as an outcome can be so powerful, because you can then choose which goal it is. If there's a snowstorm, okay, I want the outcomes that are going to change to keep my business profitable and deliver the most product in the snowstorm. Or we have customers that deliver medical supplies. What are the most urgent medical supplies that need to be delivered today because somebody needs a surgery tomorrow? And so that equipment needs to get there for tomorrow. How do you prioritize those things dynamically is a really great use case for AI.
It makes me think about when I was doing pizza delivery back forever ago. Not always, it wasn't always the closest. We usually tried to route, and we have maps in our head, right? Because we're doing so many deliveries. We had a map on the wall, but we never used it because we just knew where we were going. So, but not every time. We were usually routed the closest to the next closest to the next closest. We would have 2 or 3 or maybe even 4 pizza deliveries in our car at one time and go from place to place. So that was the most efficient way to do it. But it wasn't always the most efficient to go to the closest one first, just because of the way the roads were. So you might hit the second closest first and then the farthest, and then you come back. But you have also a hot pizza. So that person thinks they're going to get the hottest pizza, and unfortunately they didn't. But it just worked out, at least in our minds, and maybe we would have been proven wrong with AI, but we didn't have that back 35 years ago when I was doing pizza delivery. So we just had to rely on our instincts.
And if anything, it's gotten more visual and more frustrating for customers, because I live on a one-way street. And so I'm actually at the end of a lot of those delivery routes if we're getting a pizza. And you can see the courier on the app going past your place down another one-way street in the opposite direction. And you're like, why aren't you stopping at my place? But it's exactly like you said, the road network is set up in a very particular way. And another thing that's so interesting to me is a lot of the traditional software in what we do, including UPS developed probably the most powerful routing engine in the world back in the late 2000s called Orion. And they're the ones that maybe popularized something. I say popular, I'm maybe exaggerating a little bit, but the idea that 3 right turns can sometimes be less than a left turn, if you've heard that.
Yes, no,
before.
3 rights make a left.
Yeah, exactly. And so UPS was the one that proved that mathematically in their routing system, that oftentimes there's wisdom to this idea that the road network is in a very particular way. You have to work with it rather than against it, because your 3 right turns going around a block, while it looks worse on a map, the duration of time that you're going to spend in traffic and at lights and all this other stuff is going to be less, and you need to go with the math.
And reducing the risk of a crash, because there are more crashes with left turns than there are with 3 rights.
Great example. And we have this massive component of what we call drivability in our AI. So we really focus on what we call humanistic AI, which the goal is to make sure that the people out in the field, whether it's the warehouse or the drivers, are looked after, and it makes their experience better and more efficient and safer. And so a huge problem in our industry is that those traditional routing systems were kind of not great, and they would result in exactly the behavior that we're talking about, taking a left or a left turn over a 4-lane highway, which is going to take you forever. It's going to be more likely to be dangerous in a crash. So we specifically build the AI to do things that are more what we call drivable.
Yeah. My guest is Rich Savoie. He's the current CEO and co-founder of Adiona Tech, a Sydney-based software company. We're talking about how to get the most deliveries using AI to make the most efficient deliveries possible. So I want to ask you a couple of things about getting things from here to there. So what kind of delivery works best with your software? Is it packages? Is it food? Is it people? Could I use it if I was working as a rideshare driver?
Yeah, it's very flexible across all sorts of different industries. Now, as a rideshare driver, we don't typically operate in that space because it's very difficult to bundle things together, right? That's what we call the on-demand transport problem. But for things like products or service field workers, people in aged care doing home visits, people doing field technician work like servicing telephone poles or replacing batteries and checking smoke alarms in apartments, all of these things where you have a large crew or fleet of people out on the road to get from one place to another, we're used for. It's just a matter of adapting it for that particular industry. They all have their own constraints. Like, for instance, a package delivery is going to be more worried about the size, the weight, the payload of the vehicle. We focus all on electric vehicles. So are there any specific considerations for electric vehicles as well? Whereas a field technician, say in aged care, they're not so much worried about the size and the weight, but they're worried about, does this person have a wound care certificate or the nursing training that they need to visit these specific people, or even speaking the language of those specific people that they need to visit. So that's another cool opportunity for how we use AI, is to automatically adapt what we call those constraints to the product or the service that's being delivered.
Yeah, but with the electric vehicles, and I know this from owning an electric vehicle for the last 12 years, that weather plays a huge role in the electric vehicle, and how much weight you do have in the vehicle really plays a role. So you might say, the vehicle manufacturer says, oh, you get 200 mile range. That's not the case in most vehicles, no matter how perfectly you're driving.
Exactly right. And the routing systems that we built are specifically adapted to work for a petrol or diesel gasoline vehicle differently from an EV for exactly those factors. Another one that would be super relevant in Colorado is the attitude of the road, the road angle.
Yeah, it's
right?
1,000 foot
can
difference.
Get stranded.
Yeah, there's 1,000 foot difference from my house to my work.
Exactly. And that chews up so much more battery life when you're going uphill. And then you're going to get some of it back in the regenerative braking, but you're not going to get all of it back. No. And so they're all very specific.
Right.
Yeah. So we built actually a library of 150 different electric vehicles in our platform. And then you can pit them head to head and say, if I put this amount of product in it, and it's a beverage versus it's something lightweight, it's paper for office works versus something else. And then you run all these different vehicle simulations and figure out which one's going to meet your use case.
But you and I and my wife and your wife and the guy down the street and the kid who's going to high school right now, they're all driving at different rates and different styles, and they're going to hit the gas or hit the brakes. And so that you also can't really, just like with a crash or a stall or something else that you can't foresee, I don't think the AI can predict what kind of a driver that person is going to be and how much gas or electricity they're going to use when they're making their deliveries.
Well, that's a great point, Jason. And one of the things that we've invested in heavily is a closed feedback loop for our AI. So that means that we are actually taking all those data points from the field, state of charge for an electric vehicle, but also most of the commercial vehicles have telematics systems. And telematics systems is basically just a GPS box that has a bunch of sensors in it. And it can, like your phone, it can measure acceleration, deceleration, bumps, things like that. And so we're collecting up all of that data and then putting it back into the AI model to improve the routing. But it's generally, for different companies in different regions. So if you're doing deliveries of beverages in Denver, your model in Adiona is going to be quite different than somebody that's delivering paper in Tuscaloosa.
Oh, sure. It's like a Monday morning quarterbacking, basically going back to the route and looking to see if that really was the most efficient way to go. And if it wasn't, maybe the program needs to relearn and rethink about what it did when it originally thought about that and how it can do better going forward.
Yeah, exactly. And it's doing that automatically. And then it's also combining that with all of this real world traffic data. The other cool thing that we use is, and we didn't invent this or create it, is there's multiple providers now that have all of these sensors in our cars. Yeah. And then they are monitoring all of this traffic in real time and the historical profiles of the traffic, and then we can buy that from them. So we use that in our routing as something that we purchase from other companies.
And they're going to maybe get a discount on their auto insurance for having that little thing in there.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Win-win.
My guest is Rich Savoie. He's the current CEO and co-founder of Adiona Tech, a Sydney-based software company. When we're talking about AI helping with deliveries. So as an end user, I'm in a delivery, I'm in a car, I'm in a delivery truck, whatever. Is there something I'm interacting with? Do I already have the printout of how I'm supposed to go from point A to point B? And is it like your version of Google Maps or Waze?
Yeah, that's a great way to think about it. It's generally a mobile application on a phone. It can be in-cab. Some of the delivery vehicles now have an in-cab navigation, although that's still not kind of uniform. So think of it like it's an app on your phone, like Google Maps or Waze. It's got a tick list of here's all the deliveries that you're going to do today. Here's a map of what they look like. But then it's very interesting to see how different customers implement it because drivers, especially if you know anybody who's a courier, you or yourself, if somebody was trying to tell you how to deliver those 4 pizzas, you'd be like, look, I've been doing this for a while. I kind of know what to do here, right? And then some smart aleck is going to come in with some map and say, oh, but actually it's 5% more efficient if you do it like this. And you're going to say, you know what? I
Usually
don't care.
They're wearing a suit and they have a corporate, thing. And,
that's me, right? Basically, I'm the guy that's coming in and saying, hey, here's a better way to do it. And they go, look, I've been doing this for 20 years. I know what I'm doing. And they're right. Like they know what they're doing and it's fine. But the problem is that, for any company that wants to manage like 1,000 drivers, just as an extreme example, that little 5% is going to add up massively. Sure. And they do need to start being compliant to it. So every company kind of puts their own different skin on top of the app. Some of them will only let a driver see what the next delivery is going to be. They won't even let them see the whole list until the next one comes up because they really want them to trust the technology. Other ones will say, look, choose your own adventure, go wherever you need to go. But here's at least a really dense cluster of jobs. And so we know that's going to be more efficient because you're going to this dense area. Right. So,
and with the AI, I'm sure it is at the beginning of the day, figuring out all the different possibilities, which one would be the most efficient. But then after the first delivery or the first job, then it would have to reconfigure everything because everything in life at that point has changed. And so it would have to do this on a multiple basis or almost a constant basis. And it could almost change from moment to moment, minute to minute. And what about if somebody's driving from one job to the next and all of a sudden something happens, the AI goes, it's actually going to be more efficient if you skip that one and you go to that job that's 2 miles down that way. Is that all happening in real time?
Absolutely. It's continuously optimizing. It's continually updating. But it's also being really conscious of customer expectations. And that's something that is so important because our expectations as consumers have changed over the last few years, right? The boom in e-commerce growth and the proliferation of this type of technology, especially from Amazon, because Amazon, you can't discount them as a world leader in this type of algorithmic research. They have thousands of PhD qualified researchers that are working on this, and little old us in Sydney, Australia are competing with them head to head, right? So you can't discount the fact that they are building these amazing algorithms that do all these wonderful things, but they've raised the bar. in consumer expectations, because now you can log into your phone, you've got an estimated time of arrival that you know this package is supposed to be coming. And with your example, say something happens, there's a crash on the highway and I need to reroute this driver. Well, now that's going to potentially throw those estimates for all of my customers out by how much? By 15 minutes, by 30 minutes, by an hour? Is there stuff that I'm just not going to be able to deliver today and I'm going to need to reschedule it for tomorrow? So the cool thing about this technology is it also allows them to have 100% visibility and transparency on exactly what that estimated time of arrival is for everybody and to recalculate it in real time. So say, for instance, you go deliver your first delivery and something's happened and you're running way behind now. Now we can automatically trigger text messages to all of those customers to say, look, your delivery is going to be 30 minutes, been notified. And then at least the business has a chance to keep those customers happy, right? That's the way you keep them happy, is if you can't do what you promised, at least keep them in the loop.
Well, yeah, because you have those, especially from your example earlier, where you were talking about maybe this person's going to a job, maybe they're going to fix garage doors, maybe they're going to change smoke detector or batteries and smoke detectors, and so you always give a window. These companies give a window of we're going to be there from 10 to noon or noon to 3. So if something happens on the front end, then all of that cascades differently as you're trying to get those people to those next deliveries and those next jobs.
Yeah, I mean, when's the last time you ordered some furniture? Furniture and appliances are notorious for just saying, we're going to be there on this day.
Right.
And then you're like, oh, great. So I have to stay home from work or whatever and just be here all day waiting for this refrigerator. And obviously, that's just not something that people want to put up with anymore. They at least want like a narrower window so they can go on about their life.
Exactly. My guest is Rich Savoie, he's current CEO and co-founder of Adiona Tech. You are in Australia, as we were talking about, and I think that last mile logistic issue here in the United States has to be a totally different challenge than there in Australia, because, like you said, you have most of your population there on the east coast of the country. You have a major city on the west coast, but very little and tiny communities in the middle. Like here in the United States, we still have some big cities, Phoenix and us and Kansas City. And you still have some big population centers here, different than you do there in Australia. But here in the United States, there are differences also from state to state and town to town. Like San Francisco is worldly different than Boston, and it's different in New Orleans, different in Atlanta, different in Rapid City. So how challenging is it to solve these equations of delivery in vastly different places, whether it is Australia or whether it's in the United States or Canada or Mexico or Germany?
Well, luckily these days it's so much easier to get access to the real road network data. And I think the key is what I mentioned before about this access to the real-time traffic data in people's cars. So that Waze style of feedback loop allows us to do what we do globally in every city around the world without much friction, as long as we have access to that data. It's really the enabler for us. And that's something that our competitors know as well. And there's other companies working in this space. But I think that's the key to geographically differentiate around the world, is just you have to know what's happening on the ground in their road network in real time. The cool thing about it is we don't need to necessarily have that much detail on like an intersection per intersection basis. It's really more about that rich data set gives us everything that we need without having to go another level up of being like, well, does this city have more roundabouts and rotaries than this other one who relies more on stop signs? Yeah. Those things are super relevant, but it's actually captured in the data layer, and you don't have to think too much at that next level up.
Yeah, that's interesting to think about. How has your experience there in Australia helped with finding maybe solutions in other parts of the world? Because Southeast Asia, as we've talked about, is different than there in Australia. It's different than Africa. It's different in Europe. I mean, in Africa, there's a lot of places that are very rural. You still have a lot of dirt roads, and maybe you don't have that same data network feed that's coming into you that you can rely on like you would here in New York City.
Exactly right. And so there are challenges in different markets where the access to that data isn't as easy and it's still developing. And the technology will still work in those areas, but it just relies more on that historical data from the individual companies. So rather than having this kind of citywide network data that we can use, maybe we need to rely on mining data from the specific company in Indonesia, for instance. We're doing some work there, and they'll give us all their historical data and say, well, this is what we did for the last year. We can use that as a bit of a proxy for maybe more of the general mapping data. But the other thing that's interesting, and you bring up between the difference between a dense city area, a metro area, and a rural area, is in cities, it's been studied at length that one of the biggest reasons for congestion is parking. So when a person is looking for parking and circling the block, there's this butterfly effect, and especially then when they go to reverse into a parking space or whatever, there's this butterfly effect that creates upwards of 70% of the congestion in a city is from people looking for parking and disrupting the flow of traffic by trying to park. That's enormous.
Yeah.
It's huge impact. And so one of the cool things that you can do in a city environment is actually help the drivers find the best parking location where they're most likely to get a park and be able to do as much of their delivery routing on foot. Okay, so if you work for USPS or FedEx or UPS, we're talking the super high volume people, those couriers will spend upwards of 50% of their day on foot. They're not actually in the van as much as it might seem that they're in the van. They're mostly out on foot with a two-wheel dolly or a hockey bag, full of parcels or whatever, and they're walking around. And there's been studies that show that some of these couriers in city areas where there's a lot of stairs and walk-up floors in Manhattan and things like that, they burn more calories per day than professional athletes. Yeah. It's an enormously physically demanding job. But the cool thing that you can do as a win-win is direct them to the best parking locations where they can do the most work on foot. And that has this double win of reducing the costs and the emissions from their profile, but also easing congestion for everybody else.
Well, you said double win. I was thinking double parking because most of them they just forget it. They just double park.
So true. And that flow, that butterfly effect going backwards is enormous and very hard to quantify. Yeah.
Yeah. People ask me all the time, and this gets to that point too, is about congestion and how do these backups form. And I'm trying to explain to them the phantom traffic jam, right, where you're just all of a sudden, why is traffic slowing down right here, right now? It leaves them scratching their heads. Can your software then look forward and try to predict where congestion might be and not just react to it as it's happening?
Not yet. That's something that we're working on. So definitely food for the future in our pipeline. And we're working with some very good researchers around the world. I mean, exactly what you said, that there's these, especially on a highway, you see this massive slowdown. You nearly hit the person in front of you because they're hitting the brakes and everybody logs up. And then you drive by, a mile later and you're like, well, there was nothing here. What's going on? They've studied that at length and they found that it's generally from a person who cuts over multiple lanes to an exit. So what'll happen is they go from the middle or the far lane, the far right lane, they cut over to get their exit and everybody hits the brakes and it's this massive cascade effect. So a huge disruption from one person's little personal choice. And that's where we do want to be able to use there's a lot of new data sets that are coming out. Like for instance, traffic cameras, traffic camera feeds, under road sensors where they have inductive loops that are buried underneath the road and you can count traffic, but you can also measure how fast the flow is going. We're using all of those tools to build new models and do exactly what you say and be more predictive.
Yeah, but that's the human effect. If you could, let's say in 50 years, when most of us are in autonomous vehicles, that changes everything as well, because in theory, you don't need to stop at a traffic signal or a traffic light because this car is talking to that car, and you can go at the same time. You can drive more efficiently. Actually, traffic on the freeway could drive at 100 miles an hour with maybe 2 feet of space because the computers are talking to each other and there's no human reaction. They all know exactly what they're going to do at any one time. So that would change as well what you do, not today, but in 50 years.
I'm so excited for autonomous vehicles in the future because the core mathematical problems are still there. But like you said, now you've got all these new opportunities where you don't have to worry quite so much about older problems like disruptions from people doing crazy things. Now you can focus on other types of efficiency, and you can really start to get into the weeds of different parts of the problem. And also, like we were talking about, electric vehicles. The future of autonomous vehicles are likely going to be built on electric vehicle platforms, as they already are. And so there's a whole next level generation of problems to solve. And that technology is going to keep iterating. Your range and your battery quality and predictive maintenance. How often do you take a vehicle out of the pool to maintain it? All of those problems are optimization problems that we can solve.
And there should be, at least the theory is, there would be fewer vehicles that are actually owned by people, because you would have these shared taxis, shared autonomous vehicles, picking people up and then doubling up, ride shares and that sort of thing, going from place to place. And so I wouldn't need a car because one's always available.
Exactly. And if you are, say, an early investor in buying a Tesla Model Y that has that autonomous robotaxi capability, but also you upgrade it in the future to having a bipedal last meter or last foot delivery bot, you might actually be able to send your car out not only as a robotaxi, but also as a courier. Yeah. It can pick up parcels along the way. You've ordered something and you want it today. Why not let your car do that delivery as well? It's a really exciting opportunity.
Yeah, it's interesting. Rich Savoie is my guest, current CEO and co-founder of Adiona Tech, a Sydney-based software company. We're talking about AI and the most efficient and deliveries that are possible. What I also find interesting is your pricing model, because you charge by the number of stops, as I understand it. Can you explain that model, how it works, and why this is a good way to price your service?
Yeah, it's a great question. We think about it like an old school mobile phone plan, right? Like a cell phone plan where you get a certain amount of data per month, and you can't go over that cap, and if you do, you have to pay extra for it. And the reason that we price it that way is the legacy software, and a lot of the big boys out there will price it based on like the number of vehicles that you have or the number of people that are using the software. But think about that, what we were just talking about in terms of the autonomous future. The usage of this type of software and the costs that we incur as a business, we don't really care about how many vehicles are out there. We don't care about how many drivers or how many people are behind a desk using it. That's not what drives our costs. What drives our costs are the number of locations that they're visiting, because that's where we consume the data. And that's where we will continue to consume the data and process the data using AI into the future. And so you can think, as a fleet changes and gets more efficient, if they have 100 vehicles today and we help them optimize, and then they only need 80, suddenly we have to charge less because they're using 20% less vehicles, and we were basing that charge on on the number of vehicles that they have, right? So why I know it sounds shrewd, but that's the whole point of a business, is let's not undercut ourselves and then enter into a negotiation on reducing our charges because we've helped them be more efficient. Let's actually get a share of that efficiency. And in order to maintain a share of that efficiency that I think is fair, it's based on the actual work that they're out there doing, because that's where they make revenue. Yeah. They make revenue on every product or every service visit that they do, and we want a little bit of that every time.
And that's the original reason they're coming to you in the first place, because they're looking for that. We need to save some money with our deliveries. We need to do it more efficiently. We need to do it less expensively, and we need to do it quicker.
Yeah, exactly right. One of the things that you'll see on our website, and I'm sure you noticed when you looked up that per stop kind of delivery plans, we also offer what we call project pricing. Yeah. And there's a reason for that as well, because for medium and large organizations especially, they can't just change what they do overnight. And especially big supply chain and logistics companies, right? These are companies that have a lot of capital investment in warehouses and distribution centers and vehicles. And so it's very difficult to change the direction of that ship. And so we offer them the opportunity to take our software on a project basis so that they can solve a very specific problem that's kind of top of mind for them. Or they can do some experiments and say, let's do some simulation, some modeling about like, what could this Adiona system do for us? And they get to use the software for a few weeks or a few months at a time. And by the time they're done with that, they're like, okay, cool. I get it now. We've got a plan on how we're going to transition, and we can enter into an annual subscription of the software. And so I encourage anybody who's interested in this space, there's no real barrier anymore. There used to be an enormous barrier for any kind of company to do this type of thing, because just manipulating the data in and out was so hard. But this is another problem that AI has really solved for the industry, and that we've been pioneering, is just be able to take a spreadsheet full of data that came out of a very complex system, ingest it into our system, do some cool optimizations, show it on a map, and send it back. That's so fast now.
Yeah.
And so we want companies to just get started as quickly as they can.
Yeah. Can they use, obviously you said that in a vehicle you would have a unit of some sort that you're interacting with, but could a company then just have a dispatcher, and where they have one person looking at all of the deliveries and then deciding at that point, no, you're going to go there and you're going to go there and you're going to go there? Does that change, one, how the AI does its modeling, and two, how the pricing structure might work?
It doesn't really change the pricing structure, but it's a great question, because I think your description is actually what most companies do. There's very few of them that are able to let the AI make every decision fully autonomously at this point in life, and that's mainly because of other types of operational constraints, like a line haul truck with their inventory comes in late, or doesn't come in at all. Suddenly now we've made all these beautiful plans, but 5 o'clock that morning, somebody's like, "Oh, this truck didn't come in. We need to optimize everything," and so they'll get hands-on into our system and tell it, I need to redo this plan. And likewise, another thing that I'm excited about in this space is, and people don't often know, there's a massive labor shortage in supply chain generally, especially in manufacturing and transport, right? So, truck driving is the number one most popular job for high school educated males in the US. It's an enormous amount of people that are out there on the roads doing this stuff, but that pool is shrinking. So as the boomers are retiring and the workforce is aging, less young people want to get into driving. That's just been proven in and out. So the costs of recruiting drivers going up enormously. The cost to recruit a dispatcher or an allocator in a warehouse going up enormously. And oftentimes those people have 20, 30, 40 years of experience in their head. And if you don't replace them with AI, you're not going to replace them with a human. They have no choice but to use AI or dwindle. And so that's really exciting for us, because oftentimes those people see this as a threat, and they'll say, "Oh, I don't want to use AI. It's going to threaten my job." And we go, no. You have 30 years of experience in your head, and your biggest value is getting on the phone and solving problems when there's a truck that doesn't come in, or a product that's late because of a crash, or you've got an angry customer on the phone. That is something that AI is not coming for by the time you retire. Like, you'll be very, safe in your job. And so we love to see those outcomes where people are a bit worried about AI just taking over the whole system. And we tell them, no, there's still a huge role for humans, but eventually in 20 years, 30 years, let's mindfully automate the whole thing.
But wouldn't it benefit from having those people with those 20 or 30 years of experience feed that data into the AI?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's also potentially an uncomfortable thing, because they don't want to feel like they're just outsourcing themselves and being replicated by an AI. But at the end of the day, when they retire, that's what they need to do, because there's nobody to take their place.
Right. Yep. And the Hyperloop will solve all the transportation issues anyway. So it's right around the corner. Yeah, it's right around the corner, of course. The thing about AI is that, and I think we've seen this, it's good at copying. It's good at copying itself, and good at copying other things, and using everything to make new models. So could someone then use what you're already doing, in essence, steal your code and use AI to develop similar programs?
Yeah, that's always a threat. But there's something really, unique about the way that we do it, because of that feedback loop. In order to let your AI copy something, you have to have access to data. And because this is very physical, real world data that's impossible to simulate, whoever has the access to that data and the relationships with the customers that trust them is going to win in the scenario. So for a new startup to come in and start to replicate what we do purely using AI, they're not going to be able to do it, because they don't have the data. What they can do, and what some companies will absolutely be successful at doing, including ourselves, is building great relationships with big companies. Like, we have a great relationship with Coca-Cola. We have a great relationship with PepsiCo, postal organizations that we're starting to work with. It's those companies that trust a provider like us will help us win because of access to their data. And the companies that don't build that trust, that relationship, won't win, I don't think.
But as we talk about autonomous vehicles, the same kind of thing. Most of them will be programmed and use AI. And so the AI model that they're using might conflict with the AI model that you've developed, but they're going to be having similar data coming into it. I mean, data is data. I mean, there's only a few companies that is providing that flow data that I see, and incident data that I get to see every single morning and that I report on every single morning. And so there's going to be a point where their AI is trying to go up against your AI, and it's going to be a robot war. If you we're going to have Terminator out there.
Well, you're right. Philosophically, that's one of the biggest problems with AI is that it's naturally built to be competitive. We're all building AI models that compete against other AI models, and that's where the philosophers will say AI can go horribly wrong and result in Terminator 2 is because it's competitive.
Yeah.
But if you look at just what's going on in the market, so FedEx recently bought a company called RouteSmart. RouteSmart was one of our competitors, older company that's been around longer than we have, but very, very good technology. And FedEx bought them outright. And that does create an arms race because RouteSmart is investing in AI. All of our competitors are. And now FedEx is going to have their own hyper-specific FedEx data-driven routing solution that they'll use to try and compete against UPS and USPS. And I'll tell you something that's going on in the Australian market that I'm very pleased about, but I can't tell every customer about directly. I'm hoping that they listen to this and hear it by this way instead. We're creating a bit of an arms race on purpose because that's how you get the sustainability outcome. So we have customers that compete against each other using our software to then create the best route plans and the most efficiency. But you know what? At the end of the day, Jason, I told you this is a sustainability play for us. We want the emissions to be reduced at all costs. I think that's a critical thing that we need to invest in. And if, there's got to be a little bit of pain from these companies competing against each other and having competing AI models to get to that physical world outcome, that's okay.
Yeah. Years ago, I talked to a mathematician, and he had studied, and his whole math career he's a professor somewhere in the Midwest. And his whole education and professing was to solve the traveling salesman problem. Do you think you have now solved the traveling salesman problem?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, the history of the traveling salesman problem is really funny because it was for beer delivery. That's where, Guinness in Dublin was investing heavily in hiring professors and researchers to be like, how do we deliver more beer? And people have been working on it ever since. And every year, someone will come up with some innovation, typically now in the machine learning space, that gets you a fraction of a percentage faster, a fraction of a percentage more efficient in solving that problem. I don't think it'll ever be perfect in the near future because everybody's version of it is a little different.
Right.
And so again, delivering beer versus delivering furniture versus delivering paper, there's just no way to have a universal solution for that traveling salesman problem. You have to have a specific one depending on what it is that you're trying to do. And that's cool because it gives us lots of work to do. It gives professors lots of research work to do in the future.
Right.
And if you want to talk about quantum computing is the panacea for solving optimization problems in the future. It's not there yet. It's not even really close to being a practical tool yet. But if people want to look into quantum computing, that's how we're going to truly revolutionize solving some of these optimization problems.
Yeah, I was listening to somebody trying to explain that whole quantum computing where it's not just ones and zeros, it's like a ones and zeros at the same time, but in like quadruple. It really is. It's fascinating to listen to, but then you're going, how does this all work?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It can make your head explode, but that's so exciting about it because it's so powerful. And amongst optimization, cryptography, so encryption for computers, and navigation. Because the other thing that's cool about quantum is that they think it's how birds know how to migrate. It's because they've got these little quantum magnetic sensors in their brain. And so imagine if a bad actor disrupted the GPS network, we could use quantum computers to navigate without needing GPS. There's all sorts of really interesting little things that you can do with it, but some of them are going to be really big, and I think optimization is going to be one of those.
Like a beluga whale with the radar in the front.
Yeah, exactly. They've got the sonar navigation. It's incredible.
Yep, there you go. So what's next for you guys? What's next in the next You know how fast AI is changing. It can change and change your business in the next year and 3 years and 10 years. So where do you see yourself in the near term and long term?
Well, it's cool because we've already hinted at them. One is what we call self-healing logistics. So that's the concept of these AI agents that we're building to automatically solve problems. So taking that situations where there's issues in the road, there's snowstorm, whatever, and then just full automation of all those problems being solved in real time. Now it sounds really simple when you say it like that, but it's an enormously big problem to solve, and we're investing a lot of time and money in doing that because I think that there'll be just such an enormous benefit to these businesses and also to the emissions profile, and that sets us up for autonomous vehicles. So when you have this fully agentic AI system that can solve all these problems in real time, we are now creating a platform for when those vehicles are driverless. So you really can dovetail one into the next, but you can't skip ahead. You can't skip to autonomous vehicles without having agentic AI that is going to be able to cope for the fact that the autonomous conversion is going to be slow. It's not just a switch we flip. Some vehicles will be autonomous and some will still be human driven. And so what we need is these AI systems that can cope with both of those in order to transition.
Or will they be on a closed track like we have an AI van that's driving around the Colorado School of Mines just for the students, and it's only going at 20 miles an hour, so you could pretty much just cut across campus faster. But it's basically right. It's on a closed track, so you might have little cities or business parks or office parks that have some AI vehicles running through them. But then eventually you're going to have to mix those with human-driven vehicles, and there's got to be a point at where humans and computers will come to collide.
There's a massive amount of testing happening here in Australia and also in the Southwest in the US for the long haul trucking autonomous vehicles, because that's where it's just safer natively. There's less cars out in the middle of nowhere. You can run them and you can do all the testing about how they respond to traffic. But like you said, that'll be the first wave. Will be distribution networks where you have to go from Denver to Salt Lake City or to Kansas City. And the majority of that highway driving can be done by an autonomous truck. And then the learnings that we get from that and the framework we get from that will eventually start to just sneak its way into denser and denser metro stuff. And then you've got the robotaxis that are doing the bottom-up approach. It's the opposite, right? They're starting in cities with denser areas, but worrying about one person at a time. So you've got this convergence where, maybe the top down you can visualize is the long haul trucking. The bottom up is this dense point to point human taxi solution. And then we're going to be right in the middle, which is dense delivery of 100 items in a van fully autonomously.
Yeah. And there's no way I would let or want to be next to a fully autonomous truck driving from here to Salt Lake up I-70 in our mountains. That would be totally insane.
No, thank you. I mean, one spot of black ice and all rules are off.
And then it was making me think about, then you have drone deliveries and how all that plays into, this sort of mix. And I wonder if the AI would work with drone deliveries, not just road deliveries.
One of the things that I love about drone deliveries, especially, is that you can launch drones from almost anywhere. Mm-hmm. So imagine, and there's a lot of pilot testing on this type of stuff happening in the real world, especially at universities and stuff. But imagine, if you will, a truck that's operating in a city and you're launching the drones off of them in real time as the truck moves. And then they're going out and doing those last bits of delivery at places that they can. And they're coming back to the truck, reloading. That's a real application of drones that I think is way cooler and way more energy efficient than trying to deliver McDonald's or a single Walmart item or something like that. Right. Like those don't excite me, but having, a big truck stacked with inventory and drones just as a hive model coming off of this truck to deliver, that's super cool. And I think actually does provide a massive sustainability benefit.
All right, Rich, here's the $1 million idea for you. You have a pizza delivery company, right? You have like Domino's or Blackjack or whatever, and they have a semi, and in the back part of the semi in the trailer, that's where they're making pizzas, or they already have them pre-made and they're just cooking them, and then they're driving around, right? They're driving around, and then they get an order in, they put the pizza on the drone, and the drone drives it that 1 or 2 miles, drops it off, and then comes back to the truck as you're driving around.
I love it. I love it because that's exactly. There's been some experiments with mobile pizza kitchens, but that's always where it goes wrong. Is that they just it needs to be fully automated. You need a drone, and it needs to be a heated drone. Like maybe I don't, that's key. Everybody wants a hot pizza.
See, and then in 30 minutes or less, it could be 3 minutes or less.
Yeah, exactly. Just drive the dough or maybe the drone itself has the oven. It lands on your doorstep, cooks the pizza in like 10 minutes on your doorstep. It couldn't be hotter
because it's nuclear powered. So then it's radiating the pizza right there.
I love it. That's perfect.
The after effects or something we don't have to worry about.
It'll just make you hungrier, right? Everybody knows radiation poisoning.
Right, because you'll have 2 mouths and 3 livers. Well, Rich, it's been a fascinating and fun conversation. I wish you nothing but the best of luck in the future, and I'm rooting for your success and the success of this kind of program, because if deliveries are more efficient, then driving is going to be more efficient, and that's easier on me and my job.
And thank you so much for highlighting this type of technology, Jason. I know it's a little bit out of your normal brief, but it's something that is just really important, and it's something I'm really passionate about. So I really appreciate you shining a light on it.
Oh, this was Rich. That was great. This is a great conversation.
Yeah, I fully agreed. Likewise, really enjoyed it.
And there he goes. And you can find them at AdionaTech.com, and it's important that you do Adiona Tech. I have the link in the description of the show, because if you just do a search for Adiona, Adiona, at least for me, the first search link that came up was Adiona Traffic Solutions, a traffic signal and construction company here in Denver. And that's definitely not the right place. So Adiona Tech that's why. And just go to the link in the description. And what you didn't know, obviously I'm talking to Rich from Sydney, Australia, as I said, and the time zone was a little bit tricky to figure out. So, and you didn't notice while you were listening to him, but for me, I was in Denver at 5 p.m. Denver time is when I started the interview, and it was 9 a.m. in Sydney, Australia, and that was the next day. So it was a Monday evening for me and a Tuesday morning for Rich. So he was living in the future, and that was funny because I was telling Lisa, the weather girl, about my interview, and I was talking to this guy from Australia and how the time changed, and I'm telling her this at like 4 o'clock in the morning, and it was still not that. I was still living in the past, according to him, because it was 4 a.m. on a Tuesday, and I talked to him on a Tuesday at 9 a.m. his time. So he was living really in the future for me. Which was, I thought it was pretty neat. And I totally forgot. So I had this, I got an email earlier in the day from Bob Poole from Reason.org, and I get these transportation newsletters that he sends out every month or so. And one of the very first one, it says New Zealand's road user charge transition. And I wanted to ask Rich about this because New Zealand is right next to Sydney and right next to Australia, obviously. And what the news is that New Zealand is likely to become the world's first nation to transition completely from gas tax, motor fuel taxes, to a road user charge to use the roadways. And Bob goes on to talk about this in his newsletter, and he says one advantage is that New Zealand is an island nation, so it does not have to deal with unequipped vehicles driving across its borders. It also has years of experience with trucks paying a road usage charge, so the big change will affect motorists, not truckers, who currently pay for roads via fuel taxes. As in other countries, the growth of hybrids, EVs, and higher MPV miles per gallon internal combustion engines means that the viability of the gas tax, petrol tax, is decreasing, and that appears to be the reason for shifting to this roadway user charge going forward. So that's pretty interesting. I know they've tested this out in several states in the United States because of the same issues where fewer people are buying gasoline because they're driving electric cars, and they're buying less gasoline because they are either driving less or they have more fuel-efficient vehicles. And so the amount of money coming into the states for roads, specifically from gas taxes, is dwindling. And so they're looking at some way. I get dinged twice. I just renewed my registration on my car. there's a $50 electric car fee that I had to pay because I have an electric car, but it's also kind of a hybrid because it has the generator in the front, and so they gave me a hybrid fee of $50. So I had to pay both of them. I'm getting dinged twice. How is that fair? Whatever. It is, and I'm still buying a lot of gasoline for the car because I'm not always using it on the charge. Because I get 45 miles on the charge if I charge it at home, and I'm paying for the electricity and paying taxes on the electricity. Oh, well, c'est la vie. Anyway, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, or want to call the listener hotline, I sure would appreciate that. All the contact links are in the description of the show. Thanks again for being here. Thanks for listening, as always. And until next time, I'm Jason Luber, the traffic guy. Be safe, and as always, happy motoring.